More than 3.3 million acres have already burned across the United States this year, about 157% of the 10-year average, and the season has not even peaked. 10 large fires are burning across the interior West right now. One is the largest wildfire in the country. Another is tearing through wilderness that has not burned in 50 years. This is not a normal bad summer. By the end, you will understand what is really driving it, and why what happens next depends on a dome of heat now building over the West. Right now, as you watch this, 10 large wildfires are burning at the same time across the interior West of the United States. They are concentrated in 2 states, Utah and Colorado, and together they are painting a picture that looks, at first glance, like a rough but familiar summer. Fires burn in the West every year. That is the frame most people are watching this through, and it is exactly the frame I want to take apart, because it is wrong. 3 of these fires dominate the national map. The Babylon Fire in southern Utah has grown past 101,000 acres and is, as of yesterday, the largest active wildfire anywhere in the country. The Aspen Acres Fire in southern Colorado has burned somewhere between 93 and 96,000 acres, destroyed more than 260 homes, and now ranks as the 7th largest wildfire in Colorado's entire recorded history. And the Gold Mountain Fire, north of Ouray, Colorado, has pushed past 31,000 acres and is burning through country that firefighters say has not carried flame in more than half a century. Any one of those fires would be a headline. All 3 at once, plus 7 more, is a pattern. And here is the thing I need you to hold on to for the next 20 minutes, because it is the whole point of this report. These fires are not the story. They are the symptom of the story. What is actually happening underneath them is bigger, slower, and far more unsettling than any single fire on any single ridge. Let me show you the fires first, and then let me show you what they are really telling us. Or start with Babylon. The Babylon Fire was first reported at about 2:15 in the afternoon on June 26th in San Juan County, Utah, roughly 25 miles southwest of the town of Monticello. From that single report, it has grown into a monster. It is now past 101,000 acres, reported in one update at 101,073 acres. To put that in terms, you can actually picture that is more than 150 square miles of ground on fire in a single incident. There are 2 numbers here that matter more than the acreage. The first is that Babylon is the first wildfire in Utah to pass the 100,000 acre mark in roughly 8 years. That threshold does not get crossed often, and it just got crossed. The second number is the crew. Around 1,350 personnel are assigned to this fire, working with hand crews, engines, helicopters, dozers, and water tenders. That is a small army thrown at one fire, and the fire is still winning. 5 structures have been confirmed destroyed so far, which, given the remote country this is burning through, is almost restrained, and that is the only piece of good news in the whole incident. One fire official, asked about conditions on the ground, did not reach for reassurance. He said simply that a lot of things are against us. When the people whose job is to project calm start talking like that, it is worth listening to what the fire is doing rather than what anyone hopes it will do. And consider what that 8-year gap actually tells you. Utah is not a state that lacks fire. It burns most summers, sometimes badly. For a single fire there to grow past 100,000 acres for the first time in 8 years, in a state that sees fire constantly, means the conditions this summer are not a small step above normal. They are the kind of conditions that only line up once in the better part of a decade. And they are lined up right now at the same moment the other fires in this report are burning. That is not coincidence. That is a signal, repeated across state lines, and Babylon is only the loudest place it is showing up. And what the fire is doing is something you almost never see, something that sounds like a mistake until you understand it. The containment number on Babylon went backward. In one update, crews had the fire at around 21% contained. In a later update, that number had dropped to around 11%. Stop and think about what containment actually measures. It is the percentage of the fire's perimeter that crews have successfully locked down with a line the flames cannot cross. That number is supposed to climb. Every shift, every mile of line cut, it is supposed to go up. When it goes down, it does not mean the earlier crews failed. It means the fire grew so fast that it opened up more new uncontained edge than all those hundreds of people could close. The line is being built as fast as human beings and machines can build it, and the fire is still outrunning it. That is the tell. A containment number that reverses is a fire burning through a landscape that is extraordinarily willing to burn. It is not about firefighter effort, and it is not about resources, because the resources are there. It is about the fuel. Something has made the ground itself so receptive to fire that 1,000+ people cannot get ahead of it. Hold that thought, because it is the thread that connects every fire in this report. Now move east into Colorado to the Aspen Acres Fire, because this one carries the human costs the others have mostly spared. Aspen Acres is burning across 4 counties in southern Colorado: Custer, Pueblo, Fremont, and Huerfano. Depending on the update you look at, it has covered somewhere between 93 and 96,000 acres, and it is 15 to 16% contained. It started near the Aspen Acres campground, and it was determined to be human-caused. Authorities have not said more than that about the ignition, and it is worth being precise here because how a fire starts matters to this story, and I will come back to that. The damage is severe. 263 homes and 4 commercial buildings have been destroyed in Pueblo and Custer counties. Evacuations were ordered across a string of communities: Beulah, Colorado City, Rye, San Isabel, and Wetmore. The fire ran hard along the Colorado Highway 165 corridor between Lake Isabel and Colorado City, burning through parts of the Pike-San Isabel National Forest. More than 1,300 personnel are assigned to it, and at one point it was ranked the single highest priority fire in the entire nation for support requests. This is the 7th largest wildfire in Colorado's recorded history, and it is still active as I am telling you this. 263 families do not have a home to go back to. That is not a statistic you fold into a fire season and move past, and it happened in a fire that is, in acreage, not even the biggest one burning. That gap between how much damage this fire did and how far down the size list it sits is your first hint that we are not measuring this season on a normal scale. There is one more detail worth holding on to, because it matters for the rest of this report. Aspen Acres was human-caused. That sounds, at first, like it argues against everything I'm about to tell you, like it makes this one fire a story about a person rather than a landscape. It does not, and here's why. Ignition and receptiveness are 2 completely different things. People start fires every summer all over the West through equipment, sparks, and simple carelessness. Most of those fires stay small because the ground they land on will not carry them far. What determines whether a single careless moment becomes a 90,000-acre disaster that destroys hundreds of homes is not the spark. It is how ready the land was to burn when the spark arrived. The same ignition on a wetter landscape is a footnote. On this one, it became the 7th largest fire in Colorado history. The 3rd fire is the smallest of the 3 by acreage, and it is the one that should scare you the most. The Gold Mountain Fire started on June 27th and has grown past 31,000 acres, reported at roughly 31,420, at 8% containment. It is burning north of Ouray, Colorado, and most of it is inside the Uncompahgre Wilderness area. Here is why that matters. Most of the ground Gold Mountain is burning has not carried fire in more than 50 years. Think about what that means physically. When a forest goes half a century without burning, it does not stay the same, it accumulates. Dead timber piles up, fallen logs stack on each other, dry vegetation builds and builds, because the small natural fires that would normally clear that fuel out never came. A landscape that burns every so often stays relatively lean. A landscape that has not burned in 50 years is loaded, top to bottom, with fuel that a healthier fire cycle would have consumed decades ago. When fire finally reaches ground like that, it does not just burn, it detonates. The crews know it. Roughly 629 personnel are assigned, with support drawn from 34 different states. And as the fire pushed north, new evacuations were triggered in Gunnison County, with officials using the phrase life-threatening situation. The fire behavior is being driven by heavy dead timber, extremely dry vegetation, prolonged drought, below-average precipitation, and historically low snowpack. Read that list again, because it is not a list of fire causes. It is a list of symptoms of one deeper condition, and we are almost to it. Let me pull the camera back to the whole country for a moment, because the individual fires can trick you into thinking this is a Utah problem or Colorado problem. It is not. Across the interior West, 10 large fires are burning at once, and roughly 847 active fire hotspots were detected in a single 24-hour window. Nationally, more than 3.3 million acres have already burned in 2026. That figure is about 157% of the previous 10-year average, and earlier in the season it was running above 200% of that average. Sit with those percentages. 157% of normal is not a bad week or an unlucky county. It is the entire country running more than half again above its own 10-year baseline for how much land burns. And the seasonal outlooks are forecasting the year's total to land somewhere between 5.5 and 8 million acres before it is done. The drought numbers underneath the fires tell the same story in a different language. Severe or worse drought now covers 30% of the entire contiguous United States. Broader measures placed roughly 48% of the lower 48 in drought as of the end of June, and when you include the lightest category of dryness, some measures put close to 62% of the country under drought conditions. That is not a Western problem that happens to be producing Western fires. That is most of a continent running dry at the same time, with the interior West sitting at the parched center of it. Now here is the piece of timing that turns a bad year into an alarming one. All of this, the 10 fires, the record-breaking Babylon Fire, the historic Aspen Acres Fire, the wilderness that had not burned in 50 years, all of it is happening before the traditional peak of Western fire season and before the heat that is about to arrive fully arrives. This is not the climax. This is the opening act. If the West is already producing fires like these before the calendar's most dangerous stretch even begins, the honest question is not whether it gets worse. It is how much worse and how fast. Whenever fires get this big, a certain kind of explanation starts circulating, and I want to deal with it head on, because the truth is actually more unsettling than the theory. You will hear that fires like these are started deliberately by directed energy weapons or lasers, or that they are allowed to burn so that agencies or developers can seize the emptied land, or that the drought itself was manufactured through cloud seeding and weather modification. Here is what the evidence actually shows. There is no physical mechanism, no instrument detection, and no documentation of any energy weapon igniting a wildfire, and the Aspen Acres Fire was determined to be human-caused in the ordinary way, the way most Western fires start, through people and ignition sources on the ground. The land grab idea collapses the moment you look at the money, because what is actually happening is enormous public spending on suppression, crews pulled from 34 states, and hundreds of destroyed private homes, which is loss, not acquisition. And cloud seeding is real, but marginal. It can nudge precipitation out of existing clouds by a few percent. It cannot manufacture a drought that shows up in tree rings going back 12 centuries. And it cannot erase the snowpack across 8 states at once. So the real cause is not hidden. It is documented in the drought monitor, in the snowpack records, in the reservoir data, in peer-reviewed studies, all of it public. And that is the genuinely uncomfortable part. People want a villain because a villain can be arrested and a switch can be flipped off. What is actually driving these fires cannot be arrested because it is not a person. It is the ground itself changing underneath us. Let me show you that. The interior West is not simply having a hot, dry July. It is sitting inside the driest 22-year stretch the region has experienced in at least 1,200 years. That is not a figure of speech. Scientists reconstructed centuries of moisture from tree rings, and the period running from the year 2000 through the early 2020s comes out as the driest such stretch in 1,200 years, according to work by Williams, Cook, and Smerdon, published in 2022, building on earlier research from 2020. And this is the number that closes the door on the idea that it is all just natural bad luck. Roughly 42% of the soil moisture deficit in that mega drought is attributable to human-caused warming. Not the ignition of any single fire, but the dryness of the entire landscape. The condition that makes 50-year unburned wilderness ready to explode is close to half a human-made problem. The mechanism is something called vapor pressure deficit, and it is simpler than it sounds. Warmer air pulls moisture out of vegetation more aggressively. It turns living fuel into dead fuel faster, and it keeps doing it for a longer stretch of each year. Research by Abatsoglu and Williams found that human-caused warming roughly doubled the total forest area burned in the western United States between 1984 and 2015 and stretched the fire season out longer. That is why the same acre of forest that shrugged off fire decades ago now catches and carries flame. It is not that there is more ignition. It is that the fuel is thirstier, drier, and more willing to burn than it has been in centuries. Yeah. If the megadrought is the slow driver, the snowpack is the switch, and this spring the switch flipped hard. Across 8 western states, the snowpack set new record lows for this point in the year, measured on the 1st of April. Roughly 3/4 of the monitoring stations lost their snow more than a month early. But you have to understand what snowpack is to understand why that matters. It is the West's natural reservoir. It is water banked up high in the mountains through winter that melts out slowly through spring and early summer, keeping soils damp and vegetation green well into the hot months. When the snowpack collapses, that reservoir empties early. The soils dry out sooner and deeper, the vegetation cures out weeks ahead of schedule, and the window during which the landscape will readily burn stretches open much wider. The historically low snowpack that fire officials cited as a driver on the Gold Mountain fire is not a footnote. It is the same signal as everything else, showing up in one more place. The snow that did not come this spring is a direct reason the fires are burning the way they are burning right now, and that same missing snow is draining the West's water in ways that reach far beyond the fires. The reservoirs on the Colorado River, the system that supplies water and power to tens of millions of people across the region, are sitting near the operational limits below which their hydropower generation stops. That is the same drought, showing up as empty fire fuel on one side of the mountain and a shrinking water supply on the other. The fires you can see and the reservoirs you cannot are two faces of one condition, and that condition is exactly what these flames are pointing at. And now the accelerant arrives. A heat dome is building over the western United States, a strong ridge of high pressure setting up over the region as we speak. Under that ridge, the interior West is forecast to run 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit above its historical average in the coming days. A heat dome is not just uncomfortable weather. It is a fire weather machine. The ridge forces air downward, and as that air sinks, it compresses and warms, which suppresses cloud formation and rainfall and drives temperatures well above normal. That does two things to a fire landscape, both bad. It pulls even more moisture out of fuels that are already dangerously dry, and it stretches the daily burning window longer into each afternoon and evening. On top of that, the sinking stable air acts like a lid, trapping smoke close to the ground and degrading air quality across whole regions. So layer the timeline in your mind. You have a 1,200-year drought as the baseline. You have a record-low snowpack that dried everything out early. And now you have a dome of heat settling over the top of all of it, right as the fires are already at historic size and the season has not even peaked. The heat dome is the multiplier. It takes a landscape that is already primed and turns the dial up further at the worst possible moment. This is the switch that can push an already record-breaking outbreak into something the recent record has no category for. So what happens next, and what should you actually be watching? In the immediate term, watch the containment numbers on Babylon and Gold Mountain over the next few days. If they keep stalling or reversing as the heat ridge strengthens, that is your signal the fires are still winning the race against the crews. Watch for new evacuation orders spreading outward from the current fire perimeters, especially around Gunnison County and the communities near the Colorado fires, because heat dome conditions are exactly when fires make their biggest, fastest runs. Watch the air quality, too, over a much wider area than the fires themselves. With a stable ridge trapping smoke, the health impact of these fires reaches hundreds of miles beyond the flames, into cities that will never see a spark. And watch whether more large fires join the 10 already burning, because in a landscape this receptive, every new ignition, from lightning, from equipment, from a careless moment, has the potential to become the next Babylon. The larger thing to watch is the pattern itself. But one record fire is an event. A whole season of them arriving early, in terrain that has not burned in living memory, is something else. It is the landscape telling us what it has become. Which brings us back to the question this whole report is built around. If the fires are only the symptom, the real question was never what is burning. It is why the ground is suddenly so ready to burn in places that resisted fire for 50 years. We know the answer. The West is inside its driest stretch in 1,200 years. Its snowpack has collapsed across 8 states. The heat dome is about to make all of it drier still. Put those together, and the fires stop looking like bad luck and start looking like the expected behavior of a landscape that has crossed into a drier baseline and may not be crossing back on any timescale that matters to us. That is the sinister truth the size of these fires is pointing at. Not a weapon, not a conspiracy, but something harder to accept, because there is no one to blame and nothing to switch off. So here is where I will leave you. The West is already producing record fires in 50-year unburned country before the season has even peaked. The only question left is whether what we are watching this July is the exception, or whether it is the new rule. Watch what the rest of this summer does, because the answer is being written right now on the ground, in real time. We will be tracking every piece of it,